Welcome to Rock Your Reinvention, the show for high-achieving career women who refuse to settle for mediocrity and aren't afraid to take bold action. This is a place where you can authentically show up, where every dream and goal can be validated and achieved. Hi, I'm your host, Karen Freeland, a certified life reinvention coach, speaker, and award-winning author. I'm here to give you the tips, tools, and strategies to help you shift your mindset, build your confidence, and take meaningful actions so you can rock your reinvention. Ready to go from stuck to thriving? Let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Rock Your Reinvention. I am so pumped for today's episode because we have an amazing guest who I had the pleasure of meeting back in January at the PodFest conference in Florida. And I went to her session. She was an amazing speaker. And then I found out more about her show and I was like, oh, I need to have her on because, well, I'll tell you why in a minute. Anyway, we have got the amazing Lori Palau from Simply Be Organized on today's show. Lori, thank you for being here.
I am so excited. It was so fun to reconnect with you because we were together. We were in person in Florida. So great to chat.
It's been several months. So a lot has happened and unfolded in both of our businesses since then. But we were chatting all the things when we were down at the conference. But one of the things that I have seen in a lot of my clients is that as they're starting to reinvent their life and they want to do something different, they kind of get stuck in the physical environment and they have a lot of like mental weight from clutter and just all the things in their home and their physical space that just aren't really jiving. And it detracts from them being able to have as much success in their reinvention. So there are all the times that I'm like, go talk to an organizer. You need to get an organizer in your home. And I was like, you know what? We need to bring this topic to the show and address this with our listeners. So that's why I wanted to have you on. And I'm super excited to break this all down. But before we do that, would you just introduce yourself and what you do and tell us more about what it means to be an organizer and and share a fun fact.
Okay, absolutely. All right. So we'll get to the nuts and bolts. So like you said, I'm Lori. I run a company called Simply Be Organized and my podcast is called This Organized Life. And yes, I know from a branding standpoint, that was not wise, but I had no idea when I first started it, how the podcast would evolve and grow into its own entity. So you could find me if you Google my name, my company, or my podcast, you're going to find me. And my whole brand, if you will, or the brand of my company is all about living an organized life, whatever that looks like to you. Now that could be your physical space. It could be your relationships, communication, and it also means your calendar. I talk a lot about calendar clutter and being overscheduled. And for people, whether you are in the process of a transition where you're maybe changing careers or building a family, or maybe your business is growing and evolving or things are happening in your life, that is an area that we all struggle with. I have yet to meet somebody that doesn't struggle with calendar clutter. There's plenty of people that I meet that are like, oh, I'm organized. I don't need help with my physical space. Then you have people that plenty people that do need help. But everybody that I've ever come in contact with struggles in some way, shape, and form about, I'll use air quote, time management, time blocking, setting boundaries, delegating, all of those things. And to me, when I talk about organization and clutter, I'm looking at it from a really, really holistic perspective. So that's kind of how my business differs. Now, you asked about professional organizers. I love this question because there are different types of professional organizers. And I think it's really important for people to think about what their needs are or like what their pain points are. They might not even know what they need. So let me rephrase that. You don't know what you don't know, but you know what your pain point is. And so I think that is the best place to start. What is my pain point? Is my pain point that, and a lot of times it's, my house is a disaster or my office is a disaster. But when we start to uncover it, a lot of the reason why that is a disaster is because we haven't either, like I said, delegated, set aside time to do this, or maybe this is something that we just don't have the right strategies or what I like to call tools in our toolbox. So there's
Yeah.
different types of organizers that specialize in different things. And finding that right person is no different than finding the therapist that resonates with you. You've got some people that just want to talk it out. You've got some people that are dealing with trauma. You've got things. So you're going to find a spectrum of people that have different skill sets and interests. And so I'm going to oversimplify it for people that are listening.
Yes,
It might
please.
be say, I think I need a professional organizer. There's the do it for you people, right? That come in.
Mhm.
I don't want to do it. I want you to come in. And yes, I'm going to weigh in about what to get rid of and what not to, but I want you to come in and do the heavy lifting. That's people that are going to come in with a team. They're going to help whatever it looks like, declutter, organize it, create the systems, buy the products, help you install it, whatever that looks like. I used to do that. My business, because of all the things, has evolved. So I now have a team of other people who I refer out. I just did it the other day. Someone's like, I need somebody to do this. And I was like, great. I have a great person for you. So there's that, do it for you. Then you've got the people that are, I'm a DIYer. I need a roadmap. I can do it if I knew what to do.
Right.
So here's where I'm stuck. Here's what I need. Here's what I want to have, right? And you might not know it, or here's what in my perfect world, this is what this would look like. Because again, people might not know what they need, but they know where their pain point is and they know what their picture in their mind is of what that looks like. And so you can have somebody come in is like a consultant, which is what there's 3 different camps. I do 2 of the 3 now. A consultant to come in and assess what your pain points are and give you an action plan. And that action plan might include product. It might include decluttering. It might include time blocking. It might include a variety of different things. But that person is really consulting and giving you that assessment. I can do that. Then you've got the third person or the third type, which I kind of feel like is also important and underutilized. And that's more of what I call like a clutter coach. That is somebody that needs that ongoing accountability. I can do it, but I know that if I don't have somebody that's continually checking up on me, prompting me, I can bounce ideas off of. It's no different than me going to the gym, getting a completely customized workout and not doing it.
Yep.
Clutter coach is going to sit there and they're not going to do it for you just like a trainer wouldn't, but they're going to go and they're going to nurture you. They're going to encourage you. They're going to help motivate you. Even when you don't feel motivated, that's what they're going to do. And maybe you need that person for a certain amount of time until you're learning new habits, until you're getting that discipline. It doesn't have to be something that you have indefinitely, but it might be like, I have this and I need help. So it's really important, I think, from the user perspective to go, which one of these do I need?
Yeah. It's so interesting because it's very similar in coaching, right? Like there is often that pain point, but there's something deeper behind it. And so I love that you are like looking at that holistic piece, right? It isn't just about the messy closet, right? There are other things going on that we need to address in order to alleviate that specific pain point. And it is such a personal relationship. Like you need to think about what you need, who resonates with you. And it's, same thing in coaching. Like one coach is going to be great. And then, you're going to resonate with this one or with that one. And you got to find what works for you. So
absolutely. And that's the thing. And I do so much of my approach has to do with really customizing and leaning in where I do a lot of work with personality typologies and how that impacts how you deal with clutter. And I think it is, again, it's so personal. And that there's some people that resonate better with a tough love approach and some people need a little bit more softer nurturing. And when we're dealing with our physical things or how we spend our time or all of that, it's very personal. And so there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of shame that we put on ourselves that, again, you need to find that person that you're going to click with. And it's really, really important.
Oh yeah. I love a good Joseph tough love. It's needed every once in a while.
Yes.
On your website, I know that you talk a little bit about clutter running deeper than just a stack of papers or that messy closet. So Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that means? Oh, like
Yeah.
what is going on there?
Absolutely. So I referenced it sort of earlier, but I'll go back in. When I first started working with people, and again, I used to be in camp number one. So I was going into people's homes. And for me, when I first started it, my business 15 years ago, which the professional organizing industry, let's just be honest, was completely different landscape. I always tell
Yeah.
people there was no Pinterest, there was no Instagram, and Facebook was just starting to get some hype. So just to even give you a frame of reference, like there wasn't that, we weren't constantly being fed feeds of beautiful closets and kitchens and pantries. Like we didn't have those pictures in our minds. And when I would go in and I was working, my core demographic was that busy mom who was trying to juggle it all. Maybe she's a stay-at-home mom, maybe she's a career mom, but like, we're not talking about people who have like hoarding disorders and other like kind of mental like disabilities, but just that your everyday person that is just trying to keep treading water. And so, because that was me, right? I was the same way. And so I would go in and I would see this cluttered playroom or piles of paper. And I would notice that people's reactions and responses were very different. And so I was like, it's not as black and white as you have this problem, here's the solution. There has to be a spectrum. So I started to name, just to kind of give people some sort of picture, clutter, different types of clutter. So again, you have the physical clutter, which is the stuff that you see. Then you have emotional clutter, which is that guilt or fear. And that could be, this costs a lot of money, so I don't want to get rid of these shoes. Or my kid made this for me and I feel really bad getting rid of this. Or this reminds me of the time when blah, 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 blah. So you have that, but then you also have that fear, that what if I need it? I need to hold on to it. So there's all these different like layers within that emotional clutter, but it all results in physical clutter. And then you have, like I said, the calendar clutter, which is, I'm not emotionally attached to it, but I'm running in 20 different directions. So who the heck has time to organize the spices because I'm running 10,000 different places? So really pinpointing down what your struggle is. Are you a not compulsive shopper, but like, are you somebody that just likes to buy and not get rid of anything? Are you somebody that doesn't want to let go of things, or are you just too busy to deal with it? What's the origin story of the pile? What's the origin story of the pile of paper, which is why you called me in the first place?
I know this is so helpful for people because even as I'm hearing this, I'm going, oh, I'm the emotional clutter person, right? Like that's my thing. And the other day, my husband broke a glass from my grandma. It was like the only thing I have from her. And I was like, oh my, but he cut his hand. So I felt really bad because it had a crack in it, but I'd been holding on to it because I didn't want to get rid of it. And I mean, I'm lucky he didn't need stitches, but poor guy's bleeding everywhere. And I was like, I can't yell at him because this is really my fault. And my grandma and her memory are more than a glass. I have to let go of this glass. Like it's not that important. She's important. The glass is not important. And I have to find another way to represent her. So I so resonate with what you're talking about with this emotional clutter. And I think I've got some work to do.
Yeah. And again, there's no shame in that. But a lot of times, and then what happens is, and this is where I get to put my like fake therapist, and I have to say it because I'm not a licensed therapist, but I get to put my fake therapist hat on, because what happens is we live in relationship. Very few. Yeah. I mean, most of us and most of the people that call me are not, they are either, whether they have kids or not, or they're empty nesters or not, they are in relationship. They have roommates, they've got a partner, they've got a spouse, they've got kids. And your emotional clutter might, or your emotional, I don't want to even call it baggage, but it's not, but your emotional attachments might be so different than your husband's. And so it impacts how we communicate. And for a lot of people, we don't have the language. And on the surface, it's like, why are you holding onto this glass? It doesn't match our other glasses. It's got a chip in it, blah, 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 all these things. And you have this it's not about the glass. It's about what it represents. And so what I try to do is help reduce the conflict, because for so many people, clutter is just conflict. And my goal is, Like an organized space is the cherry on the sundae. Like it's beautiful to walk in and see that. And I love that just as much as the next person, but that's too superficial. It has to go deeper than that. It has to be about, how is this making you feel? How is this impacting? Like, we are not fighting as much. I'm not yelling at my kids as much because they know where things are, or they're more self-sufficient because now they can find the stuff and they don't have to ask me. So it's about what this represents in your life.
Yes.
It's not about the organized fill in the blank, if that makes sense.
It makes 1,000% sense. Yes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got some work to do. And I am sure everyone listening is feeling the same way. So thank you. So that brings me to my next question. I mean, if we now that we kind of know this and we're like, okay, the clutter isn't serving us, it's actually impacting the rest of our relationships and having like a life that is, all tens in every area. Why do you think that so many women avoid dealing with it, dealing with the decluttering, dealing with the calendaring? Like, we're just kind of like, and we throw our hands up in the air and we just don't do anything. Why?
I think for a lot of people, I have 5 kind of clutter pitfalls that I talk about, and I can go through them.
Oh, yeah.
But I really think at the crux of it, it has to do with feeling overwhelmed. And I'm going to gender stereotype that women carry most of the mental load. Again, I'm sure there's guys out there that are doing it, but by and large, women are carrying all the mental load in addition to all the other things that they need to juggle in their lives. And it's just another decision. We struggle with decision fatigue. And to take the time to do it can be mentally and physically exhausting. And I know I'm in a very busy season right now, like literally in my life. With my business, I run a big charity event in our community. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And I do this for a living, and I practice this like on the daily. It's like somebody who practices meditation, and I still have to talk myself off from getting overwhelmed. So imagine if you don't have those tools in your toolbox, it is so easy to get overwhelmed. And I think that is the overarching thing. But I can talk about the 5 clutter pitfalls. And again, they sort of are all related. So when I speak and I talk about the clutter, the model that I use, like the Venn diagram, is about 3 intersecting circles because they're all related, right? The physical, emotional, calendar clutter, all related. And the same holds true with these 5 clutter pitfalls. They're not necessarily siloed, but they all relate. And some people can resonate with one more than the other, just like with the clutter, where you're like, oh yes, ding, 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 emotional clutter. That's my thing. Oh, I didn't mean to rhyme, but I did. Okay. So here we go. 5 clutter pitfalls, everybody. Number 1, procrastination, which again, we can look at a million different reasons why people procrastinate, but it's the kicking the can down the road. So it's, I'll deal with this later is number 1 clutter pitfall. Number 2 is indecision. I don't know what to do with this. So I'm just going to put it over here and I'll deal with it later, because people don't want to make a mistake. Right. And again, that goes back to that guilt, fear. Oh, do I need this? Do I not need this? I see it a lot with paper clutter. People think paper clutter is a physical problem. It's not. More often than not, paper clutter is an emotional problem. And a lot of it's that, what if I need it? Or somewhere, back in the day, you were told like, I need to hold on to this for whatever long. And aside from like tax documents and a few other like really important things, you don't need,
let it go.
Chances are you don't need it. So, but indecision's huge because people don't want to make a mistake. So they don't do anything. And then that in and of itself results in clutter. Then you've got guilt, which we've already talked about, that guilt. Overwhelm, which is, I'm ready to tackle this. I'm going to go into this garage and I'm going to tackle this. And you look at it and you go, holy moly, I don't even know where to begin. Right. So now you're like, you're not procrastinating. You're at the point of like, I'm ready to do it, but you're like overwhelmed. Like, where do I even start? So there's that. And then the 5th clutter pitfall, which we've talked about, and it's the theme that runs through everything in our lives, is time. How much time is this going to take? Do I have the time? I don't have enough time. All of that. I underestimated how long this was going to take. So all of those 5 main areas are roadblocks for us from getting from where we are now to that organized destination of what that looks like for where we want to be.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the whole thing that you brought up earlier about clutter being conflict. And I'll just divulge. My poor husband, he listened to a few episodes the other day and he's like, well, I guess we don't have a private life anymore. I guess we don't. So anyway, he has this bad habit of leaving all of his papers out on this one little part of our counter next to the fridge. And then when guests come over, I like sweep it all off and I chuck it into this bin. And we just had like months and months and months in this bin. And I'm like, this has got to go because it's sitting in my office. I'm like, we're going to clear this out. But I knew he wouldn't touch it because it would be overwhelming and there was so much. So what I started doing was taking like 15 or 20 pieces of paper out of it a day and putting it on the bed. And I'm like, I just need you to go through this little stack. Like, can you just figure out, is it shred? Do you need to save it like for taxes or something? Or like, what are we doing with this? Now, he did really good and we got to a much smaller bin, but there were things that he was indecisive about that he stuck in the corner of our bedroom that are still sitting in a pile right now, just collecting dust because he was indecisive about what to do with it.
Okay. So can I give you, and again, this is, I'm generalizing, but this is for you and your husband and everybody out there listening.
Yes.
More often than not, when you are dealing with indecision, it is emotional clutter and you don't need it. It's just like the maybe pile, because here's why. When you have something, and we're just going to use clothes for an example. You're going through your closet, right? You know the things that you like. So if I'm going through your closet with you, you're like, yes, I want that. I wear that all the time. That's my favorite sweater. Or no, I hate that. I don't want it. When you get to the, I might fit into it, I might wear it, and you start to like hem and haw, as soon as somebody hits that like little pause button and the wheels start turning, in my mind, you're trying to justify why you need it. And chances are you don't. Now, is there maybe that exception? Maybe. But more often than not, that is an indication of at least going, okay, I'm aware of this. What am I afraid of? Or what, if I get rid of this, what is it? Is it that, and again, so many people could be like, if I get rid of, I had friends that hold on to kids' clothes. Like if I get rid of this, that represents the end of an era. Or if I hold on to those skinny jeans, there's a chance that I might get back down to that size. And if I get rid of them, it's like I'm throwing in the towel. Like there's so many stories that we tell ourselves. And, again, paper clutter is a big one because there's all this like, what if I need it? And then I have this like whole thing where I go down, how quickly could you get it? Could you, what is the thing? But for him, that indecision is likely just that emotional, like, I don't know. So I'm just going to do nothing, that inaction.
Yeah, that's a great, that's so helpful, right? And I think that these are the kinds of things I want to like jog in everybody's head is like, okay, if you've got something and you're humming and hawing about it, like it's probably time to let it go and just move on and not have that thing taking up space or mental clutter in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And another way, and this is a lot of the work, like when I work with people one-on-one.
Yeah.
I talk about 3 different areas, right? Your thoughts, your feelings, and your action. And everybody's dominant doing one of the 3, just intuitively, just like we have our dominant type of clutter. Some people are just doers and they want to get right in. And some people make their decisions more emotionally and some people make them more logically and analytically. And the goal is to really try, especially when you're dealing with clutter, or organizing, am I stuck in one of those 3 areas? And specifically, am I stuck in the feeling part of it? Am I stuck in the headspace? Am I actually taking action on these things? And that is really because you have to be working all those 3 spokes in a wheel together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That was so good. Thank you for sharing that. That was a fun little exercise too. So you get to see Lori like in action here.
There you go. This is what you get, people.
Yes, I love it. Well, I can see how you make such an amazing impact in your clients' lives. How did you get into this? What made you want to go into organizing in the first place?
So it's a really boring story, I'll tell you. It's anticlimactic. No, it was very organic. Again, remember nowadays people see it and I'm so grateful it's become like, thanks to Marie Kondo and the home edit and all these other things, it's become much more mainstream and people now look to this, which is just an elevation for the industry. And I love it. But back in 2009, when I was starting this business, it really was something that was either for the elite Richie Rich, like I'm going to hire a personal chef and a trainer and a professional organizer, or, oh, you're a hoarder and you need somebody to come in. Like it was those two
Right.
extremes. I was an executive recruiter, so I always loved working with people. And finding out what motivated people for change was always something that fascinated me. So it was in my previous life, it was what motivated you for a job change. Was it money? Was it freedom? Was it better quality of life? Was it whatever the reason was? And I was doing that really successfully. I don't know if any of your listeners remember where they were in 2009, but there was a huge economic recession and a lot of people started losing their jobs. And there was a huge transition in the marketplace. As a side note, in my own personal life, which I didn't really talk about. So I'm married for 25, going on 26 years. I have two grownish kids. They are,
Congrats.
yeah, thanks. They're almost 24 and almost 21. So I and my husband traveled a ton when my kids were little. And so I always said I was a single mom with a paycheck because I was really carrying the physical load, the mental load, all the emotional load with raising kids, working, all that on myself. And when he was around, he was helpful, but he just wasn't physically present a lot because of his job.
Right.
And so I had to create all of these systems in my life, in our home, for it to just run efficiently. I had no idea back in the early 2000s that I was essentially laying the groundwork for what I would then turn into my business. And so as I was doing my recruiting, I have a friend of mine who's an interior designer, and she said, "Hey, I've got some clients that want me to do like built-ins and organizations." She goes, "But there's so much clutter and you are really good about navigating that. Would you come in and like do a consult with them?" So I did that because I had some time because my business was a little slow. And so I went in and just did it as a favor to her and gave them here's some advice and some strategies. It was more consulting. And it landed. It really resonated. She's like, "You should consider doing this for a living." And so I said, "You know what? I'm going to give it a shot because I've got nothing to lose." And I talk about rocking your reinvention. I took the tools that I had as a recruiter, using all of that question asking and finding out what is specific for you. What is it that your goals are? What is it that you're looking for? And I just translate it from kind of their job career more into their home. And it just started and sort of grew from there.
That's amazing. Okay, so I'm way more excited about your story than you apparently were because I think that this is actually how you do rock a reinvention 9 times out of 10, right? It isn't some dramatic walk in, lose your mind at work, quit, and all of a sudden like, oh, you got to figure out this whole new path. It is this foundation, you're just kind of living your own life, and the tools and things that we have can actually become our business. I mean, that's exactly what happened for me. I went through a midlife crisis, totally freaked out, had no idea what my purpose and meaning was, knew I wanted to leave corporate, but felt stuck, had no idea what to do. Went through this whole edit methodology that then became my coaching framework. Like, who knew, right? At the time, I had no idea that I was laying that foundation, that this was going to become anything. I just thought, oh, I'm getting myself out of this deep, dark hole. And then it's like, oh no, wow, this is a repeatable process. This is something we can actually use with people. So I love that because I think everyone is sitting around waiting for this magic fairy to come down and be like, this is the thing you should be doing, instead of just sort of exploring what's right in front of you.
Absolutely. And if I could just piggyback on that for like 2 other points. So
Yeah.
and now I'm older than you. And I remember back in the day watching Oprah. I would come home from school and I would watch Oprah after school.
I did too.
Okay. And I remember one time she had, and I'm sure it was more than one time, but I distinctly remember this one time where she had somebody on and they were talking about your passion and your purpose and like, what are you going to do? And I remember, now granted, I was still like a teenager, And who the heck knows? I mean, some people do. They're like, I want to be a teacher. I want to be a doctor, whatever. I had no idea. And I was like, I have no idea what my mission in life is, what my purpose is. And I think there's people, like you said, obviously, that are having midlife crises that still don't know. And I try now that I have bigs and I have kids who are bigs, and even like that going off to college and thinking that you have to know all the things. I tell people all the time, if you have something that you are good at intuitively, I don't care what it is. It could be working on cars. It could be gardening. It could be makeup. It could be whatever it is. If you have something that you're good at, a skill, a talent, whatever, a hobby, and there's a way for you to monetize that, lean into that. That, I mean, to me, I turned my passion into a profession. I enjoyed this. This was cathartic for me, and it came really naturally to me. My brain just worked that way. I'm not an uber creative person. So like somebody that looks at something and I'm just like, I would never have thought of that in a million years. My brain works in very like process driven ways. So for me, that just came intuitively to me. So leveraging that was never something that I was necessarily intentionally set out to do. But now in hindsight, that was really how it evolved. The second thing I want to say is, because I deal a lot with people who have either put their careers on pause, a lot of women who have either put their careers on pause to stay home and raise kids, or they've been in a career that is maybe like a service business, but not a sales role, right? Maybe like a teacher or, you know, I don't know, somebody else that's not used to running a business. There's so many skills that even in my profession, when you look at like the logistics of running a household, if you're somewhat organized, you could be a good professional organizer. Like people ask me all the time, like, can you do this? Like the beauty of this industry that I'm in is you don't need to go to school for this. Like you don't need a formal education. Yes, it's good to learn from other people, but it's pretty easy to hang up your shingle. My kids, I always tell the story. My kids were little. They were like in the stroller when I started my business, or my youngest was. And she used to tell people that I was in the business of flyers, because I made up flyers that I would hand out I push her in the stroller and put them in people's mailboxes. Are you looking for a professional organizer? It was like made up in Word or something, like super, super grassroots. But I did that just to kind of start planting those seeds. And it's those little breadcrumbs that you can do for anybody that's out there that's feeling like this is overwhelming, this is intimidating, I'm not sure. Just, you can do it, because I was doing flyers.
I love it. No, I think that's so great. And we think about social media sometimes and like it's overwhelming for some people. And I'm like, millions of businesses ran before social media. And this is exactly how they did it. It was grassroots, but you know, put a flyer in a mailbox. Like you can go back to basics and old school marketing tactics, and they actually will probably stand out more because no one else is putting something in someone's mailbox.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So if someone is listening to this and they're like, okay, I know that I've got to do something. I've got to get organized. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed though. What's like 1 or 2 tips that you would recommend that they could go home, like right after they get off this podcast, and they could implement in their life or at work or wherever?
Okay. So the first thing is, I'm going to give you guys a few. So the first thing is pick one spot. Because a lot of times people are like, it's everywhere. I want you to focus in on one specific area. Now, it could be your biggest pain point, or it could be just like, but I think people should start small. So if you're like, my whole house is organized, I don't advise people going in and like, let's go in the big guns and let's do the basement or the garage or whatever. Like start small. So pick your spot and figure out what is the goal that you want this to look like. Okay. Like what is it that I want out of my space, right? Do I want to walk in and feel a certain way? Do I want it to look a certain way? Like really kind of paint that picture in your mind so you know what that goal is. Now, here's a tactical process. So I think there's both. There's that like big picture. What is my goal of this space? And then there's the tactical. What are the step-by-step ways that I'm going to approach it? This is how we do it. Again, there's no right or wrong, but this is the like simply be organized method. And I'm going to tell it to you right now. It's called your organizing ESP, stands for empty, sort, purge. let's start with your countertop, right? Let's say your desk. Let's just say the top of your desk is a mess. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to take everything off the top of your desk. And everyone's like, oh, and again, we're not talking about doing your whole garage or your whole closet. We're talking about one very defined space. You're going to empty it. Now that's the first part. Second is sort. Now you're going to sort into 4 different categories. Here are your categories. Category 1 is keep. And keep means I'm not only keeping it like in general, but I'm keeping it here. So it's something that has to like live here. So because again, there's stuff that you're going to keep, but that might have to relocate and that's a different pile. So you have your keep pile. Then you've got your recycle pile. So that is going to be your trash, anything that's garbage, anything you don't want anymore. So it's outdated, it's paper, it's a scrap, it's whatever. You're getting rid of that. So that's your relocate pile. Then you have donate. Now, obviously, we're talking about desks. You're probably not going to have anything donate, but for closets, playrooms, any other space, you would have your donate pile, right? And then your 4th pile is your relocate pile. Now, most people talk about the 3. They talk about the donate, the trash, the keep pile. But what about the stuff that you want, but it doesn't need to live here? And that's where a lot of people get bottlenecked. Now, that could mean my kids were playing with their Nerf guns and I grabbed it and stuck it here and now it's like never got put back. Or I was hanging a picture and I have a hammer and I didn't put it back. Or maybe this doesn't need to, or maybe this is like sentimental to me. Maybe my kid's christening dress or my grandmother's glass doesn't need to live with my regular glasses because it's something I want to keep to look at on display, but we're not going to use it. So I'm not going to keep it with my glasses. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Or I'm going to put this in my kid's memorabilia bin because I don't need it to take up space in their closet. They're not using it, wearing it, but it's something I want to keep because it is sentimental. So I think there is a place for that sentimental stuff, but it doesn't necessarily need to live in the current spot. So you've got those 4 piles. So now you've gone through your sorting. You're not necessarily moving them in that moment, but you just have your piles. So you're sitting in the spot, you're sitting on the floor, you have your 4 piles. Now so now your P in the ESP is the purge. So you have all that stuff. Now it's time to say, I'm just going to look at my keep pile. And this should be a fraction of what I have here. And now it's time to organize that. So it makes the organizing process so much easier because now you're looking at the volume of stuff that is actually there. And you're removing all the unnecessary.
And that's a good gauge too. Like if you've got a keep pile that's like huge and you've got like 2 things in the recycle or 2 things in the purge pile, like maybe we need to revisit that keep pile again. Maybe we're not.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe we're still emotionally attached to some things or
exactly. And sometimes that's where having an objective third party person coming in there to talk through it with you can be really helpful. And again, you're talking about learning these new strategies. So then eventually you're going to hear my voice in your head going, and you're going to start asking yourself these questions. Okay, how quickly can I get it again if I need it? Does it cost a lot to replace? Could I borrow it from a friend if I needed it? Like and you start to give yourself, you'll learn these prompts to ask yourself so that it will become more like intuitive for you to make those decisions on your own.
Oh, this is so amazing. These have been such good tips. For anyone that's listening and they want to find out more about you and maybe work with you, where should they go?
Yeah. So my website's the best place. And it's simply the letter B, like boy, organized.com. From there, we've got tons of freebies. So we've got all kinds of checklists and whatnot. Obviously, our podcast, if you're listening to podcasts, is great because we got all kinds of stuff. But if you're interested in any of our like paid offerings, coaching, you need a professional organizer, even if you don't live like in our neck of the woods or whatever, like hit us up. There's a quick form and we could talk all about the different offerings that we have depending on your needs, goals, and price point. So that's it. Simply be organized.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this today. I know that this is going to really resonate and give people a lot of good ideas about what they need to do to declutter their life.
I was going to say, I felt bad because at the top of the episode, you asked me to share a fun fact and I didn't. And I was like, I didn't answer her question. And I don't know. I don't think anybody's waiting, but okay.
I'm waiting.
Okay. So my fun fact of the day, it's a little anticlimactic, but I've never had a cavity in my life.
That's really good.
It's a fun fact.
I had like 18 when I was pregnant with my second son. I don't know. I lost my brain and went berserk and started drinking like ruby red grapefruit juice at night, like next to my bed, would like sip it before bed, and then couldn't figure out why like all my teeth were falling out after the pregnancy. So that's my fun fact for today.
There you go. So these darn kids.
So I'm really impressed by you that you have had 0 cavities. So thank you. See, she knows how to organize her mouth. She knows how to organize your house. Call her up. I love that. All right. Last words from you. If you could say one thing to the women listening who know they want to make a change, but she's just not sure how to get started, what would you say to her?
Shut down the inside voices and take a first step.
It's that easy. Just take that first step. I love it. Thank you. Wise words. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad you could be here today. Thank you for all of your wisdom. And until next time, everybody, stay fabulous. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're inspired to take action by committing to one of the tips or strategies we talked about in today's episode. And if you want accountability and support, I've got your back. Join my private Facebook group, Successful Working Women Rocking Reinvention, today. You'll find a community of like-minded women waiting to support you, exclusive content, and helpful resources to ensure you succeed. Lastly, if you loved this episode, do me a favor and be sure to leave a review. Together, we can encourage more women to live their purpose. See you next time.